Hi, everyone, and welcome to a distribution strategy group event called The Rewards of Process Automation and How to Put It in Motion. You like that little turn of phrase, process automation and motion? I thought that was pretty clever. I'm Ian Heller with Distribution Strategy Group. We've got two great panelists today. In a few minutes, I'll be joined by Alex Witzpolek with Continuum and Nick Schwalbach from SPS Commerce. These guys are really experienced in this topic. It's going to be a great conversation. Thank you for joining us. Before we get started, just one quick commercial message. We have got a fantastic system called Demand RX that helps you estimate demand by product category, by account. And then you can sum it up by zip code or county or state or branch area or district or region. And it's an incredible way to do Salesforce coaching to understand market share, understand wallet share. This was invented by my genius business partner, Jonathan Bine. If you're going to go into business with someone, choose a genius, I like to say. Sorry that it didn't work out for Jonathan that way. You can reach him at jbine, J-B-E-I-N, at distributionstrategy.com. Okay, let's get started with the program. I'd like to welcome in Alex Witzpolek and Nick Schwalbach. Gentlemen, how are you today?
Good, Ian.
Doing awesome, Ian. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Good. Okay, well, I'm going to go in order of the people on the screen. I want to hear a word about your background. So take a couple of minutes. Alex, you'll go first because you're on the slide first, and talk about your journey in technology and distribution.
Yeah. So my name is Alex Witzpolek. I'm the founder and CEO of Continuum. We are the first reverse logistics platform for distribution and manufacturing companies. And reverse logistics is really just a fancy word for anything that moves back up the supply chain. So returns, warranties, repairs. We consider that to be a multi-party process, especially when you're dealing with defectives, damages, needing to get credits from vendors, and it's a challenging process. My journey here was interesting. I ended up I played college football. I played at the University of Louisville, and I played with guys like Teddy Bridgewater, Devontae Parker, who were all in the NFL. And I'm like, what am I going to do? I'm doing commercial real estate in Kentucky, which is not exciting and not fun. Where can I make some change? Where can I actually disrupt the world a bit? And ended up joining a company here in Chicago, leading North American sales. And it was a CRM and analytics play for distribution and manufacturing companies. And it was one of the first times I got to see the impact of network effects and how much automation you can get in the supply chain when you're connecting manufacturer, distributor. And in that world, we were connecting through sales. So we were able to identify end user pull-through data for manufacturers in a networked platform. So had a good run there and ended up, like I tell everyone, I'm a glutton for punishment, I guess. I fell in love with this industry 13 years ago, never left. Worked for a company in document automation for distributors and manufacturers, automating sales orders, purchase orders, PDF, invoices. So always really in the automation space, different veins of the automation space. And now tackling it the reverse way in the returns world. So excited to be here and dive deep into these topics.
So you were an expert on taking orders. Now you're an expert on taking returns.
That's exactly right. So, we should do this the reverse way.
Well, what's interesting is that whole order intake is, got all these automation tools and it's very well organized and distributors are all over it and they're super productive at it. And then the returns come in and it's just absolute chaos, right?
Yeah. No structure, no SOPs on it, lack of clear understanding even internally and what it looks like. So little more challenging to wrangle for sure.
Yeah. Good. Okay, Nick. So you've been at SPS for 14 years. I don't know what you can talk about in terms of numbers, but that company has exploded over those 14 years. Yeah. And your career has been a very impressive progression through that time. So tell us, what does SPS do and what do you do and what have you done? And give us some information about you and your background.
Well, I appreciate you not having me go back all the way to my college days because I was not playing football with Teddy Bridgewater and those guys. So I appreciate not having to try to compete with Alex there. But I did grow up running a couple of retail stores here. We're based out of Minneapolis. SPS Commerce is headquartered here, and I spent a lot of time. We bought from a local distributor here, and so I spent a lot of time with both sides of that. The distributor became a really good friend of ours. And so when I was going through school, similar questions that Alex was asking, was just like, hey, what are you going to go do with this knowledge you have? And there was a small company here called SPS Commerce. We were about 275 employees when I graduated college, and I came over here. I was working full time for other companies through college and stuff like that. So the college was kind of a side gig for me. And we came over here, and when I interviewed here, what was interesting is SPS Commerce is really working up and down the supply chain, right? We're not just focused in one specific area. We are focused in buying groups that are buying product or ingredients or things that people are going to process and manufacture them, or they're buying and reselling finished goods, or they're end seller of finished goods. They're really capturing that, and they're all about making two parties work better together. So we are a software supply chain company, but we're really focused on how do we help that buying organization, whether you're a distributor or in other segments of buying, and their suppliers, and how do you work better together, right? That ecosystem of the supply chain only is as good as the two parties or three parties or four parties, whoever is involved. And so how do we help them? How do we educate them? How do we measure them? How do we give them tools and opportunities and also knowledge in order to do business better together? So I've spent my career here at SPS Commerce of 14 years, through all the different departments. I've been in technology. I spent some time in support, traveled North America and Europe, doing implementations with customers. And then now I live in product management. So now I'm helping all the teams across all the parts of SPS Commerce kind of work with our distributors and other customers in new and better ways, on top of honing in kind of what we've been doing over the last 20 years to drive our success, and how do we continue to reinvent ourselves moving forward.
Fantastic. We got a ton of experience in this room. So I am looking forward to sharing that. So I put together some questions for you guys in advance of the webinar. So let me start with the broadest one to help us sort of dial in what we're going to talk about. And that is process automation is a very broad topic, obviously. How do you define it and categorize it? What are the categories within it? And then where do your solutions fit in? And Alex, we'll start with you on this question.
Yeah, so we went pretty deep on this, and really putting together a framework for how you should be looking at automation inside of distribution. And so we think about it into two different buckets. Is you have top-down automation, which is looking at a department, a team, a process, and you're saying, okay, what are they currently doing, and how do I optimize that, right? So you have top-down optimization. And so if you just go a little bit deeper into that, that would be, okay, I see my team hand keying orders. I see my team manually processing returns. I see my team keystroking invoices. How can I take that same function, and how can I actually just find a better mousetrap of doing that by getting human out of the loop in that? And that's we consider optimization. And then you have like a new realm, which is, I think we're just in the very beginning stages of this. And that's really bottom up innovation when we're talking about automation. And so, okay, take everything I know about this department out. Like, forget what I know about how I process orders today. Forget what I know about how returns look today. And let's actually innovate that. And so, like, examples of that would be like, hey, actually, I don't just want to have better route management for my fleet. Like, what if we looked at something like drones, like Amazon's doing, right?
Sure.
Like, sounds crazy, right? But like, how do you actually innovate your business model, which is hard for distributors to do, right? You've been in, you may be at a company, third, fourth generation, been around for 100 years, and it's hard to break out of the mold. And so I think when we look at automation, it's like, okay, well, we know the tasks and jobs that have to get done. We're either going to look at those and say we can do those better, faster, cheaper, with less manual power, or we could say I can fundamentally transform how we're doing things today. And I think those are probably the two different ways that we can go a lot deeper on, but those are the two ways that when we look at automation in a business, we kind of bifurcate those.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because you're asking this important question, which is, does your current process inform new solutions or constrain your thinking about them? And starting with that question and deciding, well, hey, maybe we should get outside the box. Maybe we shouldn't even have our own delivery trucks. That sounds insane, but let's talk about it. And then most of the time we're going to draw back from that, but why not have the discussion, right? What are the costs of owning versus leasing your fleet? I mean, it's interesting that you characterized it that way. I haven't heard that, and I like it. Yeah. And so Nicholas, for you, process automation is a broad topic. How do you define it and categorize it? And where do SPS solutions fit in? And sorry, I keep calling you Nicholas instead of
You're
Nick.
fine. You're fine. You're good. So I think Alex, it's a great way of defining it. I think we look at the world very similarly, just maybe a little bit different lenses. That I mean, our company was built and founded on looking at what do the buying organizations and their suppliers do manually, whether it be together on their own, and how do we insert some automation, might be tools, might be technology, might be just like us helping consult on them on how what we see in other organizations to do differently. But the first place is like we insert technology in there in maybe a different way. The one piece I would add on top of there is the technology is really only as good as the education. So a lot of the process automation we back up with education, right? So what are the expectations of one side of the other? What is the way that you want to do business or the way that you want that technology to work together? So that is a really big part of that automation is understanding what are the expectations and then how do you automate that from a process standpoint. Then we do a very similar to Alex, kind of what you're talking about, which is then we are out trying to be out in front of the customers of reimagining, you know what, where are the leading top dogs going, right? So what are the top distributors doing? Can we help them in that? And then can you help bring that to the rest of the market, maybe in a cheaper, maybe they don't need quite as many drones or they don't need drones that fly as far or whatever that idea might be. That, you know, just riffing off Alex, what you're talking about. And then how do you bring that to the rest of the market, right? Distributors are constantly changing. They are a unique and very important part of the marketplace that exists out there. And so I think that is a segment where we see a lot of iteration on like, where are we going in the future? And also how do we play off of each other, right? Like, let's not reinvent the wheel if we don't have to. So our solutions really help in that inserting technology, but then also meeting customers when they want to be a cutting edge or when they want to reinvent something. What do you see from other places? And then what are the solutions that SPS has in order to kind of go to?
So I want to play off the education question. So it's my experience with distributors that much of the time they aren't using anywhere near the full functionality of the systems that they own. Is that your experience too? And is the education the problem? Is it the awareness? Is it they don't need the solution? What is causing these distributors? And I'm sure it's not just distributors to, use just a small part of the functionality, even though it seems like there's more that could be useful to them. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo your last comment there, where it's not just distributors, right? Like, I mean, I can point to systems that I use, whether at home or at work, that we're not using full functionality. So that's not unique. I think, later on we can probably get into some questions around what we're seeing and why that is. I think it's one, not unique. I think we actually encourage our customers to take what they have versus going and buying new or trying to find new things to solve, right? Like, what do you actually have? Like, take an inventory on that and how do you use it more effectively? We just wrapped up a project with a distributor that we work with. And just by using one of their inventory planning systems differently last year, they took out $60 million of inventory out of their supply chain, right? Like, that's a big number. And that was not new technology. That was just looking at it similar to Alex, how your second bucket of that innovation of like, you know what, like, we have this functionality. Do we need to change the humans? Do we need to change the process flow? Do we need to just this add-on that we buy because it's part of the product? We just need to actually use that, whatever. So I think there's always an opportunity before you go buy new or try to like change the world, like looking at what you have in order to assess that situation and see like, is there now some things are really old, right? Like, and so you need to upgrade them, not support it, whatever, right? That's a whole different ball of wax. But like most systems are very capable of doing a lot of different things. It's just sometimes you got to have the right mindset to take advantage of it versus saying, nope, I need the new shiny.
And it seems to me that sometimes the problem is that it's a lot of work to automate a process, right? I mean, we're talking about process automation, but a lot of times it's like, oh, we've got this variable and that variable, and then we don't really have the report in there automatically. And so we need someone doing swivel chair stuff anyway. And so even if you've got the ability in your software stack, your technology stack, you kind of give up on trying to use it because it's hard to automate the process. Alex, do you see that?
Well, I think so. Automating a bad process faster is just spiraling down a bad process quicker. Like that, that's not a great outcome. And so I think where you see some of that, hey, we're not maximizing our value here is, are you willing to actually rethink some of your processes? It's funny because we do a process where we call it a day in the life. So we actually sit down, we'll we'll sit with the CSR group and be like, show us how you currently do it. And then we'll come back with a proposed future state. And like, but wait, you're not doing this anymore, and we're not doing that. I'm like, well, because we don't need to do that. Or we're in that process and we're like, all right, let me ask you a question. Why do you do that? I don't know. They look over at someone else. Why do we do that? I don't know. Right. And so a lot of times there's things, institutional things that have been, institutionalized that you need to do it this way. But does that person actually understand why they're doing it? And is there another department connected where they need that piece of information? And so you have to be able to take a more holistic approach to let's say we're in a transaction set. What's the downstream impact? Like, why do you need to be doing that? Is there some downstream impact? And what can we pull back to make it a leaner process, which is going to get you, the right recommendations on how your process should be before you go automate it.
Yeah, and also you don't have to automate every outlier in the process, right? So if you can automate 80% of the use cases or of the transactions, and then you need an intake decision that says this can go through the process and this can't, you otherwise you would design these processes that are just impossibly complex, and you never get the yield out of them because you're trying to make them account for every possible scenario.
And then, by the way, they change, right? Like, I mean, that is so well said. Like, so well said. And like, we preach that all the time of like, you know what, you're getting a 0 right now. If we can get you to 60, 70, 80%, that's a win. But you have to, Ian, you hit on that, or Alex, you hit on this. Like, you also have to have the org and people behind it though, too, right? So like, you can come in, I'm sure, Alex, and pitch like this new way, but if the leader is stuck in their old ways, or like, whatever, family business, don't want to change, like, list your reasons, it is really hard, right? You have to have the openness to change and try new things. And then, by the way, you got to iterate. So what's the point of building a process to cover everything when you're going to probably get it wrong or need to change because you're going to go into a new category, you're going to get a new customer, a new location, whatever it might be. Start small, right? Like, and then kind of go.
Yeah, the answer the question you need answered is, okay, so maybe it's not going to be 100% automation because there's not a lot you'll have 100% automation on, right? But okay, is there a workbench? Is there a process for the outliers, for the 20%? And is there logic to be able to queue that up to the right people? Because you want a human thinking brain in those situations. Like, you actually don't want to automate this exception scenario that you're running into. It's the 80% that you're talking about where it's like, your team shouldn't even be looking at that. Where you want a human is when they need situational awareness. And I think that's I think any automation, process automation for distributors kind of falls in that same bucket.
Alex, as you know, you guys just sponsored a white paper I wrote on returns. And it's a good example of what we're talking about, because I went to 75 distributor websites and looked at their returns policy. 20 of them had none. And most of them just said, call us, which means they have a completely manual returns process. I mean, right. And then
that lives in a couple people's heads. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to get the authority from someone, and the other people, the policies were all over the place in terms of number of days you can return a product and restocking fees and what's the process. I mean, it's just a gigantic mess. And it just feels like this is a classic case of, hey, there are a lot of variables in this process and we've just kind of given up. And at least for not everybody, but a lot of distributors are just like, oh, screw it. Just call us, we'll work it out. Or some of them just say, some of them go so simple. It says, we don't return. We don't take accept returns. There are a couple that said that. I mean, isn't that just kind of a use case of this? I mean, you guys are trying to tackle a complex problem, but man, from going to these 75 sites, it's a real problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, right? Is I think historically these companies have said this process, and I'm sure there's a lot of processes are like this. Well, there's so many. Well, it depends, right? It's funny because I ask a question and I'm like, and let me guess, your answer is it depends. And they're like, yeah, how'd you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's time we start to help put some standard operating procedures in place, the framework for this. So not everything is it depends, because that's completely unscalable as well.
Well, and it frustrates customers too. And Nick, I know you guys talk about like doing business with trading partners. What I learned as I began to work more with your company is a whole bunch of what you do isn't just software. You're actually setting up those relationships. And I assume part of the reason is that there are a lot of manual processes that you have to replace with automation in order to do EDI trading with suppliers and with distributors. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, so all this change talk that we've been talking about so far, right? Like that's one thing to manage that within the distributors company and everything else. But then when you are affecting and want to make real change with your trading partner community, suppliers, vendors, whatever word you want to put in there, um, introduces a whole new complexity because that's outside of your, like, you can't control them. You're not their manager. You don't write their paycheck, right? Like you control what you order from them, but outside of that, it's very little. So we start when we do a lot of these projects, almost every single one of them. You talk about day in the life, Alex. We go in and we do like a little bit of an assessment, like a light assessment, to understand how they work, because that informs where is their opportunity, what are you going to change, and then what does that mean to your supplier community that exists outside of your four walls. And the most important thing that you can give them, why are you doing it, or what's in it for them, what is going to help them help you and help you help them, right? Like, and that's why it's so important. That the EDI is the way that you transact or share information, or maybe you share it via an API through some format, or whatever that is. That is only enabling the process that exists inside that distributor or inside the supplier, how you're talking back and forth. It's that business context and the business reasons and the processes that it's going to enable. That is where the real value and real change happens, right? Just because I get data in a different way is mildly interesting. Now, if I use that in a different way, or I use that to inform a process or a new process in a different way, that is where we see a lot of distributors differentiate themselves. Is like, I have better visibility. I know where my stuff is, when it's coming, who it's coming from, all those things, which allows me to then build different processes. If I don't know those things, like Alex, you've been talking about, I can only build a bad process and get better at a bad process, right? But how do I rethink how I communicate outside my own company? That's where we spend a lot of our time.
So I want to talk about AI and its role in here, because you know, so as a sort of a corollary, AI is much better at handling messy data than traditional technologies, right? I mean, you do a query in Excel, if one cell's bad, it dies.
Yeah.
The process dies. But AI can, like, for example, look at product data and help standardize units of measure and convert between imperial and metric measurements, and a lot of stuff that's very difficult for traditional systems to do. AI is good at it, getting better at. Is it helping as you look at, whether it's automating trading partner transactions and relationships, or trying to help distributors put in real returns processes, or other things that you've worked on? Is AI changing the game a lot now, a little now, and how is that going to change over time, do you think? Nick, do you want to go first with this one?
Yeah, for sure. So, I think if any of us are in a conversation with a customer or prospect, conversation like this, and you're not talking about AI, right? Like,
Yeah, of course.
it is the new buzzword and will be for a while here, probably going forward. I think, right now, what we're seeing at least is a lot of companies, everybody's racing towards it, obviously, right? If you're not, you're behind already. And what you're trying to do, though, is a lot of companies are wrapping a current process around with AI, right? So you brought up like the standardizing unit of measures, or understanding, what, I have all these products and here's the safety information. Like, can you just give me a summary of like the things I have to be prepared for? Or, what, I'm going to go do business with these 4 distributors. What do I have to consider? What is the different process? What's the return processes from the vendor, from the vendor guides or guides that the retailer gives out? How do I standardize that versus having a human read them and try to summarize and things like that? We're seeing a lot of current processes being thrown into AI to try to summarize things without having to be a human, basically work efficiently. And I think we're investing in that also, just for internal tools and how do we help our customers summarize that stuff. I think where you're starting to see some companies break out, and where we're going with it, is then how do you use that to inform a very different way of thinking, right? So not just how do I put it on top of a current process today, but how do I look at that to analyze all my data to understand who are my most important suppliers and how do I work with them differently, or the opportunities to analyze maybe the data that I have on them, or things like that, and really revolutionize the processes I have with them. versus just putting it on top to do the things I do today more efficiently. It's where do I use it in the future?
Yeah, I think where we see there's a couple different areas. Even we talk about like process optimization, right? You're like, well, AI, how does it know my current process, right? When you're dealing with data, it's very binary. Like things match or they don't. Um, and so areas that we see is like in our implementations, right? So are you using AI to integrate to identify key fields that the teams are filling out? Like an example is like some of our customers put their reason codes in something called a class 4 versus the reason code bucket. It's like, why do you do that? Well, we still have to replicate it. So I think the implementation and speed to value is a major one where it's like kind of behind the scenes, right? You're not actually seeing it, but you see it in the time to value that you get. And the other area for us is there's really not been historically much digital exhaust, if any, on the returns process. And Ian, I know you and I talked about it, but like surfacing, hey, did you know that this vendor you have more you have a much higher percentage of returns, or you have way more defectives with this return with this vendor, or let's go down to the product line. And now go product line compared to customer sales volume compared to returns volume. Hey, this customer has a very high rate of defective returns compared to their order volume. Is there an installation issue here?
Yeah,
Right? Do
sure.
we need a education? Like, so I think it's like once you get the process digitized, like it's actually like has digital exhaust on it, then you can really use AI to glean insights from it. Where historically it's like, well, if it's just purely a transaction set, right? So, like for example, a lot of these things we're saying we need to, automate. It's like there's some sort of flow or some decision making involved there. So therefore, the only thing that you have data on is the baked final transaction. All the decision or data points that went into getting to that decision, you have none. You have no visibility on.
Yeah.
And so how do you make sure that you have that captured? And that's really the role of AI, I think, when you're talking about process.
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't make this up, but I heard somebody say, wouldn't it be ironic if the best way to get a fully autonomous car is to have a robot running ChatGPT driving it? And it's like because they're getting vision now in ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And so the bigger point there is some of these technologies come at you sideways, right? Where it's invented for one thing, but then it gets used for another and it displaces another, right?
Yeah.
And you didn't see it coming. And so the question out of that is you have to have a lot of talent or specialized kind of talent on your team if you're a distributor to understand solutions, not just AI solutions, but good technology solutions. And I would imagine that one of the barriers or opportunities in you guys landing a client is their ability to understand, appreciate, and actually execute the implementation of your solution. So if you agree with that, what do distributors need on their teams in terms of talent in order to embrace solutions that really bring process automation to them? Nick, you want to consider that question that I didn't prepare you with in advance? So, I'm putting
No,
you on the
no,
spot.
you're good, right? If I can't answer on the fly, then maybe this is too scripted, right? So, I think that I think it's a great question. I think first and foremost, pulling somebody out of another industry that maybe doesn't use distributors or understand the importance of distributors is super maybe not well understood or maybe valued enough. Distributors they're unique, right? Every business is a little bit unique, but they
Sure.
fulfill a need that maybe doesn't exist in or maybe people don't think about it unless you're in an industry that uses them.
For
So I think
sure.
first and foremost, having people and talent that understand their role and the importance of what distributors there do is good. The second thing, I'm a huge proponent inside of SPS Commerce and just everywhere that you need people that are willing to step outside of the technology world or the support world or sales world or whatever. What does our business do? And what do we fulfill? And then how are the solutions, the processes we're automating, how do they tie back to the success of what we're trying to go do? And if you don't know that, the chances of you getting whatever you're working on correct are very, very low. So, and the reason I bring that up is that is not a skill set that I think anybody should take for granted. The ability to be hungry for that knowledge, to understand what is our business, how do we grow, what's our importance, who are our customers, all down to how do we make money, right? That is a really, really important skill set. So I think when you're looking for talent, if you have that skill set, you're naturally going to challenge, you're naturally going to innovate, but also understanding then where do you pull the trigger to innovate versus I'm just going to blow everything up and start over. You got to have a little bit more tact than that, right? But most people that are curious about that are more than willing. But I think understanding the business and then being able to apply that to the solutions that exist out there is where I would start from like a talent perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the distributors that you guys advertise on your site. I'm sure there are many more, but it's, Granger, MSC, Fastenal, Wesco. I mean, these are very, very sophisticated distributors, but I don't think they recognize your need because they're big. I think they recognize their need because they have the talent and they understand what they can get out of it. And Alex, I'm wondering if you run into the same thing when you go call on customers, that it's like, well, look, people have to be savvy enough and have the talent around to understand that this is a significant opportunity and that the costs of a bad returns process are mostly hidden, right? And so one of the things you run into is people go, well, I know exactly what my returns are costing me. So if I put in place a policy restricting them, I'm going to save X. What they don't have is a formula that says, well, yeah, but you're going to make, X number of customers stop buying from you because your policy is too restrictive. So that's just one of many hidden costs and returns, right?
Yeah. For us, it's a mindset, right? You said like, what are the types of people that you need? Like, and when you ask the question, my mind's going to like, what kind of, like, do you need an IT person? And it's kind of
Sure.
and I'm like, well, it depends on the solution that you're deploying, right? So like every solution is going to be different. But when you think about like the DNA makeup of the people, I think it comes down to like any process automation comes down to, are you intellectually curious if there's a better way to doing what you're already doing? And are you curious enough to dig into the details? So I'll give you an example. Like, we had someone say, well, if we allow our customers to self-initiate returns, I'd be concerned that they might actually do it. And they would actually, we would get more returns. And I'm like, well, there's probably two different ways of looking at that. You could see that as a bad thing, or you could say, wow, I delivered a bad customer experience. I don't want to hide from that. I want to know.
Right,
I want to know that, and so I think and this is something I went deep on this. I have a podcast that I run. It's called Return to Basics. And I had Kevin McGurl, the founder of Sales Eye, on it. Who,
right.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And it's I don't know if it's frustrating is not the right word. Sad's not the right word. But what I find is there's like this theme, and it's not backed by data. It's just feel. But like bigger PE-backed distributors generally are more curious and willing to embrace things that will show them data that they need to know, like when it comes to the intellectual curiosity, because there's less of that. It's ingrained in me. We've done it this way for so long. And the family owned, and it still happens. We have, probably a decent bit of our customers are still family owned, but the natural inclination for these family owned companies, distribution companies, is like, we'd rather just hide from some of these things, right? And so I think it, like, that intellectual curiosity, it's you really got to force it out, and you got to recognize, like, okay, as a company, how are we when it comes to like hunger to advance and not do things the same way? And if we're not indexed enough that way, we've got to find those people, because even if you recognize, like, I've been in this position for so long, I don't do that naturally. You've got to surround yourself with those people.
Right.
And people willing to keep that fight up, Alex, right? Like, because you are going to be, I describe it as, you're going to be the one person screaming in the rain, and you have to trust enough that you're going to willing to fight, right? Like, from that perspective, because when you start bringing those people in, it's a hard change, right? If the people have never been challenged that way, and this is an uphill battle we fight every day when you go into a new customer of like, we've never thought about that. You get people that embrace it and run at it. You get other people that maybe are resistors. And then how do you navigate that, right? It is a big thing, and every company's different, right? Which makes it fun and interesting. And but the talent, it starts with the people, right? Like most companies are only usually as good as their people, and I like we're a firm believer.
All right, so let's take that point and talk about distributors in general versus retailers and manufacturers, because so Alex, I know from my returns research, retailers are completely different than distributors. They all have, there's academic research, and all the big consultants have laid out their thoughts, and here's here's the formula to help you understand how much sales you're going to lose if you restrict your return policy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's none of that research and distribution. And Nick, with SPS, the whole notion of automating the trading experience between suppliers and retailers has been going on forever, and it's well accepted that that's what you do. We just came out of this horrible supply chain crisis, which is still continuing because we get all these wild cards like the Panama Canal drought and terrorist attacks in the Red Sea and the Mediterranean. So it's like we just feels like we're just plagued by supply chain problems, and it's just a no-brainer that you would put in automation in your supply chain to help you improve your service levels and your inventory turns, right? But distributors seem to lag, even though all that stuff is out there and it's not hard to find. It seems like distributors are still lagging in process automation. Where's that coming from? I mean, why are we behind? I mean, I think some of it is we have much more complex transactions and more complex products, but some of it just seems to be a mindset. And so, Nick, I mean, you've worked on both. You've worked with retailers. You worked with distributors. I mean, give us the cold hard truth. Why are distributors slower on this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I would go on record and say that I think other industries are just as slow to adopt. I think that there's just more research and more focus. Again, back to my point of distributors, I think are understood, right, or misunderstood sometimes as far as what they bring. They're not the front face of the selling industry, right? Like they are helping enable and play a very important role there. So I do think you don't have a lot of big name retailers people are paying attention to that are like owned by mom and pop shops anymore, right? They are a corporate brand that brings that in. Distribution is very different. You have a very the market for distribution, depending on the pockets or where you're looking, can be a lot more fragmented, right? That's why you see so many acquisitions happening, and a lot of kind of roll-ups of these different distributors happening, is because a lot of that world still exists. And like, it's about the partnerships I have with the company that hauls my goods or where I buy from, right? It's a very relationship-based organization, which is great. But there's plenty of other people, retailers, whoever you want to compare yourselves to, that run it that way. But I think that sometimes overtakes, or they want to bury, as you talked about, Alex, like some of these things in the sand, or they just, it's not worth it, right? Like it's not worth my time. The margins distributors are working with can be a lot smaller. So the ability to have capital to go improve some of these things is hard. And also keep in mind, as a distributor, I'm constantly changing, right? Based on what my customer needs, and for me to satisfy what they need, I'm maybe adding more and more items and more suppliers than any other segment of the supply chain does at any point in time. So I'm so focused on just running my business. It's really, really hard to get out of that and kind of go focus on that. That is, I think, when we talk with our distributors, their number one focus is how do I run that? Because I'm constantly changing, versus like, how do I get 2 steps ahead or 3 steps ahead, right? How do I just kind of progress? That's where we spend a lot of time, which is why it's a little bit harder.
Got it. Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I think all those are really good points. So I went out, I had coffee with one of the ex-CEOs of Grainger. And we were just talking about specifically the topic of automation and some of the journey that they went on. And I had a conversation with one of their ex-CIOs, and he was talking about the early days of e-commerce. I mean, this is your world, Ian.
These are my buddies, man.
Yeah, exactly. This is your world, right? And so he said, and it just, I'll never forget it, like just the way he said it. He's like, so anytime we did an automation project inside our own 4 walls was great, like great outcome. But the moment we engaged a supply chain partner, whether that's a customer or a vendor, because we 10x'd our value no matter what it was, matter what, we 10x'd our value. And so I think one of the things that you talk about retail, anytime you add another layer in your supply chain, you add another layer of complexity. So you go look at the building materials world, manufacturer, two-step wholesale distributor, retailer, right? You go into flooring, they have the same thing. And we've gotten a lot of these markets consolidated down to like one step, right? You have manufacturer, distributor, then you're selling to another business, contractor, something like that. But anytime you add that another layer in the supply chain, that person now has to deal with segmented and fragmented data points of their manufacturer and their customer. So like you take a part number, for example, you're like, well, my customer calls it this, I call it this, and my manufacturer calls it that.
Right.
And when you're dealing with two parties in the supply chain, it's like, okay, we just got to work together. But to Nick's point, when you're a distributor, you're like, I'm getting it on both ends. I got to deal with pricing discrepancies up here, pricing discrepancies down here. I'm just trying to keep up with the ever-changing world that we have, with my suppliers changing, my customers changing. And so I had a post on LinkedIn about this, but like I firmly believe like we're stepping into a new age of technology for distributors where, and if you look, our company mission statement is a seamlessly connected supply chain, period. Imagine the unthinkable. It says nothing about returns and warranties. And I think you're going to see more harmonization in automation in the supply chain moving forward because people have been around long enough to recognize that challenge of the multi-tier supply chain. And that's really some of the biggest things holding back automation, aside from mindset.
Yeah. Okay, Nick, do you agree with that? And let me just add one caveat, that we're reaching this new era of technology for distributors, and there's an enormous amount of mergers and acquisitions right now, right? And we have these roll-ups. In fact, when I went out and looked for 75 different websites, it was hard to find 75 independent distributors where I didn't have to get referred to a parent company, right, for the return policy. So now there are always new people entering the market, and so there's some addition of fragmentation to the consolidation. But I would say right now we're clearly leaning towards more consolidation, and so a lot of firms are getting bigger. It feels to me like that's not only an opportunity for your companies, but it's an opportunity for the industry to be more competitive with the huge players like Amazon Business and Grainger, et cetera, because scale matters in technology, right? And big firms can just implement technologies and get efficiencies that small firms can't. So it feels like if you're not careful, if you're running a small firm, you're going to become increasingly less competitive over time because the big ones are getting bigger, and they are putting in automation across their enterprise, from order entry to returns to replenishment transactions, everything in the middle. They're going to gain these cost and efficiency and effectiveness advantages if they don't invest in similar technologies. Nick, sorry for the long wind up. What do you think?
It's good. I think, the only caveat I would give to that, I think it's all right, is I think anytime you start getting a roll up of things, you open up an opportunity because those companies get so big that now all of a sudden you're chasing the big customers, that there's always opportunity. It creates a new level of like, niche is the wrong word, but it does create an opportunity of you create a new level of customer that maybe didn't exist with just regional distributors or whatever, right? So I think it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out, specifically in the distribution space. I think Alex, when you hit on, and you're 100% right, that whenever I improve things outside of my supply chain with my vendor community or whatever it is, it's like the impact is way more dollars, way more improvement, whatever your measurement is much greater. So when we are partnering with our distributors and they're doing a lot of roles, we have a number of distributors that their growth strategy is through acquisition, right? The technology systems, right? A lot of companies focus on, oh my God, like they have a different ERP, they have a different WMS or inventory, whatever systems, and like we need to integrate all those. I think the really good ones are actually focused on, I actually need to automate my vendor process, right? Because I'm constantly onboarding new items, I'm constantly onboarding new suppliers. And they're focused on the things that I can standardize across all of my businesses that are going to drive the most improvement in, which is outside my four walls, right? Like inside the four walls, the reason I probably bought this company, one, they're a viable company, which in today's world is like not easy. And so they're probably making money. The employees know what they're doing, right? So that I can maybe leave them in a box for a little bit. Yep, the system's got to talk in some way, shape, or form, but I don't have to do a complete rip out and replace. But what I do need to make sure is I have the same vendor process, the same vendor information, same way to onboard items and everything. So that, because that is where my differentiator is from my competitors, right? A lot of times is that process. So we spend a lot of time on outside the four walls. We help inside the four walls too, but a lot of it is outside because that's where the improvements come.
And the lack of that is where there's tons of bottom line impacts too. Like we work with a very large Milwaukee Tool distributor, and they're like, well, when Milwaukee Tool updates their warranty policy and we forget to update ours, and we're taking returns back thinking it's under warranty, and then we try to go return it back to Milwaukee Tool. Uh-oh, they deny it. I'm just eating that cost. Like it's like this supply chain integration. It's like end user, distributor, manufacturer. Like there's so much cost in that business, which and you're running on thin margins. It's like optimize that. You're going to get big yield. Yeah, you're going to have to get to the WMS. You're going to have to get to whether automated picking systems. You got to get to those things, but like there's tons of efficiencies in those, but the multi-tier supply chain is where you could save it on both ends of the business.
Yeah, it's funny because even with the consolidation, according to our numbers, there are only about $500 billion plus distributors in the United States. And if you
I was just looking at that report you guys have. It's really cool, actually. There's like the top 100, and I was looking.
There just aren't some, then there's another 500 that are between 500 million and a billion. So you got 1,000 that are over 500 million, and then it gets a lot broader. But we talk to a lot of technology companies, and they'll say, "Well, we're looking after, we want to go after $1 billion plus distributors." I'm like, okay, well, just start making phone calls or drive by their offices, man.
You know who they are.
Yeah, exactly. But that, I think that number is going to go up. But the smaller, there's still a whole bunch of small ones out there, even with the consolidation. And I just think that it's been a manual business in a lot of ways for a long time, and it's just past the time when distributors need to focus on process automation. I think AI is really helpful. I mean, I mentioned earlier, but transactions for distributors are, you think about what's an account in retail. Well, it's my name and my credit card, my email address, and my home address, right? An account in B2B might be dozens of different sub accounts and dozens or hundreds of users. And you got different assortments that you have to present to each one sometimes. And you've got different pricing matrices for every customer. And then the products are more complicated. And you might have a blanket PO with multiple releases, or you might have construction liens, or, all these different complications. And so I think one of the reasons distributors have done everything manually is that it's really hard to automate some of that stuff compared to retail. But I think AI is like the tool that's going to unlock the ability to do a lot of this, because it can actually look at your historical transactions and understand some of those complexities and help you program around them.
I don't think it's just AI. I mean, AI is definitely going to help, but I also think there's been a conscious amount of investment in technology for distribution companies too. And I think there's just there's enough people, hungry technologists, that want to solve problems and have been around this industry solving problems with technology for long enough that I think it really internalized what the real problems are. When you're talking about part number data, unit of measure issues, right? You talk about all the things that you just talked about when you need to automate. I tell people this all the time. I'm like, this isn't like it's very complex automating any process in a distributor, but it's not unsolvable. It's just a Rubik's cube.
We're not designing rockets.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just a Rubik's cube. You have to wake up every day and want to solve that Rubik's cube for these companies. No.
Yeah. Hey, Nick, I know you guys do a lot of stuff. Where do most distributors start with you guys in terms of an implementation? What do they buy typically?
Yeah, I mean, I think every company is a little bit different depending on the size and journey you're on. But where a lot of companies start with us is looking at how do we not only make sure that we're engaging with our supplier community or vendor community in a similar and consistent way, right? So what does that look like? Is everybody sending us the same information? Are we communicating the same way to everybody? So on and so forth. Then it really goes into it. And sometimes that really goes into, sometimes they start with like, how do I measure my supply chain? And by the way, that's not just suppliers and vendors. It is also my own performance, right? So where is my inventory sitting? How, what are the turns, things like that. So I'd say those two areas are a lot of times where our distributors start. We're seeing more and more distributors actually start with us around like item information because they're constantly onboarding new items. Now that's from new suppliers or existing, right? You brought up Milwaukee, Alex, right? Like Milwaukee does their pipeline event every year in the summertime or fall, spring, summer. And those are new items I have to now onboard, and I want to do that quickly, consistently. I don't want to have a process for Milwaukee, a process for DeWalt, a process for everybody else, right? Depending on the category you're in. So a lot of them are really focusing in on how do I solve that item information problem? How do I solve the vendor onboarding process? And then, by the way, I need to measure that to understand who do I keep buying from? Where's my opportunity to improve? And you're layering, metrics across all of those to understand that and kind of report back it's all around how is my supply chain performing? And it starts with, kind of those three components.
And Alex, what about you? When people reach out, or are they reaching out to you now that they know that you guys exist because you're a startup? Or, I mean, when you go out there, do they get the need, even if they don't understand the specifics about it, or you have to educate them about the opportunity?
It's interesting. This is actually, I find this fascinating. There was an opportunity, and one of our BDRs called the VP of sales, and VP of sales, like, returns is not a problem for us. Okay.
Click.
Another person on the team calls the CRO. CRO goes, this is actually one of our CEO's biggest projects of the year. I'm like, wait, what? Right. So, but I find this fascinating, right? Because returns are such an insidious problem because it touches at minimum 3 departments up to 6 departments, right? You have your CSR, you have the warehouse, you have finance, you have, if you have your own trucks, you have your logistics, and then you have digital, right? Because it's going to be on the website. And so you could be feeling the pain in any single spot. And it's not until you get everyone in the same room and they're like, finance is like, oh, is that why I get short paid on all these invoices? Because you don't receive it in and you have this dispute with the CSR and or you're going up to the vendor and you get them all in the room and they start to talk about it. So there's a lot of education that we still need to do because we're creating this category to show distributors that it is a problem. Right. But it's interesting because the CEO who recognized it was newer in the business and came from a more retail-oriented business to understand that problem and was like, first year in, this is on our top 3 priorities to solve. And so we are seeing people like, hey, we have an active project to solve it, but it's not super frequent.
And nobody told the sales VP.
No. Just go sell more.
Hey, Nick, so what does the ideal customer look like for you? And when you come across someone and you rub your hands and go, man, we can help these people. And I'm going to wrap up with this question, but what does it look like for you? And I'm not just talking about, well, they have a specific need for a value proposition. I mean, they've got a mindset for process automation, like the new CEO you just talked about, Alex, right? I mean, there's a guy who sees the customer experience opportunity, but probably sees the oh man, I got a bunch of hidden costs.
Yeah.
When I pick up this board, there's a rat's nest under there that nobody knows about, right? And so, Nick, when you come across a customer and you go, oh man, we can really help these people, what is the the mindset or orientation of organization that makes you excited?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, I think that mindset, Alex, you talked about like a new CEO coming in or somebody new. They tend to have like, they're looking at it from almost like a third party point of view when they first come in. Anytime you can get a customer, and I don't care what maturity level you are, that has that mindset, they are willing to explore ideas to make themselves better. Any organization that hangs up the phone on you and says they don't have a returns issue, or it says, you know what, I'm perfect at onboarding a supplier, or I'm perfect at finding the best carrier rates or whatever,
Yeah.
That is somebody that has been either doing it for a long time, doesn't want help. Maybe he's got, something up his sleeve he just doesn't want to share with you, whatever it might be,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Usually they're not cruel intentions, right? That is like the ideal customer for us, because that allows you to actually have an honest conversation and say, what are your top 3 initiatives that you're doing? Can we help you with those? Or we spent some time with these parts of your business, and actually there's probably a 4th, or maybe something that's a little bit more important than the 3rd in order to go in there. So it isn't even like a size. It isn't even like that. I think it's really about that mentality. Obviously, the less mature, the more opportunities there are for process automation. Then it becomes like, well, do you want to pick 1 through 20 or 70 through 100, right? Like, so less mature is always better. But even if you have mature, like, you're constantly evolving, or you're dying. I think the other part of distributors that sometimes we can overlook is that distributors are they're like a 2-sided monster, right? Like, I'm dealing with my own supply chain coming in. By the way, I have to satisfy a supply chain going out the other side. So somebody that also is acknowledging that I'm not just trying to solve one side, because if I solve one side, that's great. But the opportunity is sometimes double, triple if I solve it on both sides. And so again, it comes back to that mindset though, of like, are they willing to explore the opportunities?
All right, Alex, I just have a minute and a half left for you to answer the same question about what's an ideal customer look like.
I mean, look, we can get into ICP, but it's similar. It's a mindset, right? I mean, we have customers that do 350 returns a year, like 1 a day. We have customers that do 30,000, right? So it's tough for me. Like, you have to have this amount, right? Because it's just
right.
Yeah,
No,
so
I'm thinking more in terms of the mindset.
Yeah, I mean, the thing from a mindset is I think customer experience focused, like, big time, right? Like, you're not you don't want to hide from the fact that there might be a return and be like, well, we'll just make them eat the cost, right? We don't want a return, right? And I think that's that mindset in also, like, hey, anything we can do to make our customer just deliver a great experience. And then anyone who has a digital focus, right? It's like, well, because we actually drive end users to e-commerce sites. We actually help get adoption on there. So I think those are probably 2 things that from a mindset standpoint.
Yeah, I think the differences can be subtle but important, right? I mean, our customers, number 1 or number 1, right?
So that's very good. Yeah.
Okay. All right, guys. Well, hey, I want to just share one more thing for the audience, so please hang on for just a second. We have a show coming up in Chicago in November, the Profit and Productivity Summit with optimization strategies for distributors. We're not just working on margins, we're working on things that these guys work on, which is reducing cost to serve, putting in place process automation, driving better rebate and co-op performance. It's going to be a wonderful conference. We've got some fantastic speakers. And if you sign up by September 7th, you will be a VIP. You get access to a VIP lounge throughout the event. You get a, let's see, what was I going to say? Oh, upgraded room, a wine basket in your room. And you get a 30-minute follow-up call with me and Jonathan. If you're not a VIP, you get 2 follow-up calls. Just kidding. So, all right, you guys, thank you so much. It was wonderful talking with you. Really enjoyed it. I hope you did too. And to our audience, go out and automate your processes, grow your business, reduce your costs, provide better benefits to your customers and to your business. And we'll see you next time on a Distribution Strategy Group program. Bye now.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.